All right. So we're going to be talking about how do you hire people for the long term and build a team that energizes you and is super productive. Now, this is not about if you've got a short-term contract thing and you need a specific skill for a short period. This is not the hiring process for that. We're talking about long-term finding people that help you build your company and your team. Now, this is appropriate for business owners, entrepreneurs, team leads, heads of, HR professionals, talent acquisition specialists, anyone who's trying to hire and find people they actually want in their team. We're going to break down what we call the old approach and a new approach that changes the game. And we've done this across heaps of industries and it works really well. And I'm going to go through exactly the thinking behind it. The old approach we're going to call process driven, right? Where hiring is seen as a process to bring in candidates into your company to become employees, a process driven approach to hiring. And to build up what the general approach to that is, you generally start off and it's focused on rapport building, trying to find common ground between the candidate and yourself. Then it focuses on experience, what they have done so far, where they studied, where they have worked, what skills they've built, experience focused. And then it goes into Q&A. So questions and answers, right? Generally where the company is telling them what they want and the candidate's trying to show that they can do it, that they fit. So questions and answers where the candidate's trying to tell the company, yes, I can do what you want. And then details focus on the specific role, the responsibilities, the perks, the benefits, this sort of stuff. And this normally plays out like the standard approach would be, you have a job ad, candidates come in, you look at their CV, you look at their experience, you phone screen them, start to go, oh, do I sort of like this person, something like this. Then the interview will be focused on issue some sort of rapport, like, oh, what are you interested in? Something, trying to connect with them, build some common rapport, break down their experience, and then Q&A sessions. Now, the challenge with this is when you go through this process as well, and why it becomes a process, a lot of this becomes a box-ticking exercise, is what you're grading is open-ended. So you see people list like, what are all the strengths of the candidate? What are all the weaknesses? This sort of stuff. When you've got an open-ended list of factors that could be scored, it's very hard and becomes very complex to figure out what actually works and doesn't work. Undefined is, do we actually know what something looks like? If we say, we want someone who is credible in X, do we actually know what that is going to look like? And what are the markers of that? And can we actually find that in a repeatable way? A lot of times it's undefined. And so what you end up with is people that sit around and after an interview and they just talk about what they feel from their gut. Yep, I like this, I don't like this, I like this. Undefined leads to gut feel decision making. And then if you do grade factors, a lot of them we tend to see are binary. Were they this? Were they this? Were they this? Were they this? But almost nothing is binary. So the combination of these things leads to hiring generally just becoming a process, right, where you can't learn. That's, in a very quick, and we'll keep breaking this down, is the old approach. Now, we'll say the new approach to hiring is outcome driven. Now, when we talk about outcome, what we've got to remember, the outcome we're solving for is long-term success for the candidate in your company, making your team more productive than before. That's the outcome you want. To solve that problem, you have to see hiring as an extension of leadership, right? The same thing that you're looking for in a candidate when they're coming in is what you're looking for in your existing team on how to become productive. This is a skill in itself, and it's an extension of leadership. I'm going to break down what this means and how you actually then go about it. The first part we're now going to build on is commitment, right, at the start of the hiring process. A person can fling out their CV to 500 people. Before you spend any time looking at them, all this sort of stuff, you want to look at their commitment to it. Do they actually want to join your team, right? And so you're looking for a small commitment at the start to show actually positive intention before you invest any time into it. The next part you want to focus on is their mindset. Their mindset is what's going to determine whether you get the outcome you want. And then all of the focus, and this is where all good stuff happens, is on alignment. What you're trying to solve for is, where is the company going? Where is your team going? And where is this candidate going? And are they aligned? Because you cannot create a long-term successful relationship if they are not heading in the same direction. So we're learning to solve for alignment. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to set factors. So if you look at your existing team, you look at the best people you have, what is common amongst them, right? Generally, it's not common experience. It's some common mindset that they have. What is that? Can you define it? So as an example, a thing that we see when we study lots of teams, and even from ourselves and our own teams, we see one example of a factor that we think is really great is a person's ability to take responsibility for their own outcomes. We call that personal accountability. If you find people with high personal accountability, your team will be more productive and it'll be more energizing and it'll be better. So you set something like that. That's what I'm looking for. This allows you to simplify. Then you're trying to grade it on a spectrum. You're trying to learn the ability to grade. What does it actually look like, right? When a person takes responsibility for their actions. What does it look like? It's not a simple thing where it's just like, oh, they did this. This is definitely high personal accountability. It's not that simple. We're learning to grade this. So when we set factors that we observe in our team that actually lead to success, we can simplify and then we can learn to grade it. This allows us to begin building an outcome-driven hiring approach, which is an extension of our ability to lead. Okay. So again, we're going to run this theme throughout the whole video, but is process-driven hiring. These are some common things that happen when we're doing it. The company tells them what you want. So the company tells the candidate what they want. I want people that do X. Our values are this, right? What you get is the candidate tells you how they fit it, right? They're not showing you who they are. They're now showing you how they fit what you want because you've told them, right? And then because you have this, like we went through before, open-ended, undefined stuff, you then gut feel-based grading. This is at the seed that we need to unpick. So to make it an outcome-based thing, all focused on creating alignment between two different parties, you need to build trust through authenticity. You need to show, don't tell what you want. And then you need to have an outcome-based grading system. So you need to learning the skill of actually grading the factors that are important to you. You can't tell them. You don't want to tell them. You need to show them and allow them to show you what they're about. So this is what we're gonna sort of zoom through some very specific examples across candidates, what companies can do, so you can apply an approach like this and build an outcome-driven approach to hiring. Okay, so now we're going to look at what's the first step in doing this. And that is realizing that leadership equals hiring. Hiring is literally a subset of your ability to lead. And for anyone who's a business owner, an entrepreneur, team lead, a head of, and all this stuff, leadership is a long journey that never ends. It's a continuum going to infinity of our ability to lead. And hiring is just part of that. Right. And the sooner you need to own your responsibility to shape your team. When you realize this is empowering. It puts you in the driver's seat to be like, you're trying to build this great high performing team. You can do that. You need to take hiring seriously. You need to take responsibility for what is it that when I'm hiring actually leads to the outcome I want, which is a really productive, highly energizing team, something like that. So part of it is just figuring out, what am I actually looking for when I hire? So it's not a box ticking exercise, nothing like this. What is it, right? And then this is the big question, right? How confident am I that I can find it? How confident are you that you can actually find the thing you're looking for? As an example, right? You know, we really value personal accountability, like a person that takes responsibility for their outcomes. Right? Let's say that's what you're looking for. How confident are you that you know what that looks like? What are the markers of that? In a 30-minute interview, what are the markers that are going to say to you, yep, this person on this spectrum is a 4 out of 5 for their ability to take responsibility for their outcomes. And have you then, and this is the big test here, if you do have some factors like that and you do grade them in interview, 2 years down the track with what actually plays out with the person, and their impact on your team, if you were to look back at what you were viewing at that point in the interview, how accurate was your view, right? What was your ability to grade that thing, right? And very rarely do you see a link from the outcome back to what you actually graded and your ability to grade it. And so we're going to go through as well throughout this video, actually ways to grade things, what to look for and how to do it. But so this is the first step in it, right? Is just realizing hiring is part of leadership. It's a long journey. You can control your ability to do this when you accept you are responsible for it, and you can be empowered to actually shape the team that you find motivating and energizing. All right. So now what we're going to do, just go back a step here. Let me go back here. So again, process-driven hiring. What's happening is the company tells them what they're looking for. The candidate tries to tell you how they fit it. We've got to unpick this. We want to build trust through authenticity. The company wants to show who they are, not tell them. And you want the candidate to show you who they are, not tell them who they are. So how do we do this? We're going to step through a very practical example of how a company can show who they are, not tell them. Example one, company will say, we value transparency. That's telling someone you value transparency. How do you show someone you value transparency? Right. So the flip side to this is something like, we record all our meetings to improve transparency so that people can go back and have a record of what happened and we can solve for the best outcome. That's how you can show you value transparency. This is you tell them you value transparency. So another example, we reward top performance. Okay. So that's telling someone you reward top performance. How would you show them? The top performer in your team was enrolled in a mentor program and received $10,000 bonus. This is an example of how you would show something that you did in how you reward top performers. This is telling them you reward top performers. This is you trying to be authentic. Obviously, don't lie about this. You're actually showing them something you did. And it also helps when you list all these things that you're telling them about, it raises your bar to say, well, what do I actually do about it? Right. And this is the thing about trust and authenticity. You want to be real about what you're doing, not just saying, yeah, we reward top performance and you've never done anything about it. They're going to find out. And if they are a top performer, they're probably going to leave. Example 3, we have a great culture. That's telling someone you have a great culture. So how do you show that? We have 8% of turnover after probation ends, which is showing to them once we work through our differences and we find people that are aligned, they tend to really stay, right? And so we're pulling in the same direction and it works well. This is showing someone potentially that you have a great culture. This is just telling someone, and people don't believe that. It doesn't mean anything. This might mean something. All right, so we've gone through now like how to start showing who you are as a company, not telling. So we're now going to start applying this further down. So how do you don't tell the candidate what you are looking for. So don't tell the candidate what you are looking for. You're going to want to get them to show you who they are and assess alignment with you. So we're going to go through this. So you can't tell them what you're looking for because that's going to make them try to say, I fit what you're looking for. They're going to, and especially a lot of these questions that candidates get asked are very predictable. Lots of companies are asking them, so they've already got their answers and they're trying to say, I am what you're looking for. Don't tell them. Get them to show you who they are and then assess, is that aligned with you? So what do we mean by this? Let's say something like, telling them, right, is we value curiosity. How do you exhibit this? Can you give us examples? They would get asked this heaps. You've told them we value curiosity. How do you exhibit it? So they're now going to come up with a story of something they've done in their life that shows that they are a curious person. That is not useful, right? That's what we call the old approach, Q&A driven, this thing. So how do you do it in the new approach to try and really get them to show you who they are, and then you are learning to grade that and assess fit? So it's something like, tell us about something you are passionate about and what has that interest led to. You're not telling them what you're grading. You're asking them to show you who they are. Tell us about something you are passionate about. What has that interest led to? Now, then they're going to talk about whatever they want. Now, whatever they're into doesn't really matter. What you're assessing is their mindset. And in this case, if you are trying to grade curiosity, you're going to see now hundreds and hundreds of responses to this. And you're going to see, what does curiosity actually look like when someone answers it? So I could talk about myself, for instance, right? If someone asked me this, something I'm passionate about is building great teams. I've started on this journey over a decade ago as a manager. I was in the hedge fund industry running a trading desk, and I was having lots of issues hiring people, and I made lots of bad hiring decisions. I have then gone down a deep rabbit hole trying to figure out, well, how do you actually hire better? What does this look like? Right? I've built out frameworks. I've designed psychometric tests. I've designed, reflection and behavioral assessments. I've studied all of these things out of curiosity, right, to solve a problem that means something to me. If I told that story and someone's trying to assess curiosity, they might grade that as a decent reflection of me being curious. So that's an example of asking an open-ended question that you are funneling to assess a specific thing, and you're learning to grade that specific thing. Okay, so then the next thing is people say, well, will they actually answer honestly? Like, I can ask this question, what makes them want to answer honestly? So the first one is you need to build trust. Building trust equals leading by example. So as a very quick example, in a process-driven, the old approach, generally what happens when you get to the interview stage and you're doing this sort of stuff, you sit in a boardroom, super sterile environment, and you fire out these Q&As. That entire thing is not conducive to someone going, oh yeah, I really want to show you what I'm about. It just isn't. It's the opposite. So how do you do this? This is like a tactical thing. And from an outcome-driven perspective, you're trying to get the person to show you who they are. One, you can use things like neutral settings, like going for a walk or to a cafe and things like this, a neutral setting. The other one is to lead by example and share authentically. So as a very practical thing, this is a thing that we do for ourselves, is someone from the person's team who they're hiring, who the candidate will potentially be, will go down and meet them and go for a walk. Now, on that walk, the person will actually share what they're currently working on, what their day is like at the company, what challenges they're having, what things they're excited about, what they're doing. And they're actually going to share and show the person what sort of like a day at the company for them in the team looks like. And it's not about painting this perfect picture. It's actually about the person trying to be real and share authentically about showing them this. And then even at the end of it, you say to them, this is why I've done this. I'm trying to share with you what actually a day in the life of the team is. We want you to also do that, and you're trying to make them feel comfortable. Lead by example, go into a neutral space and share with the team. It's like you're trying to genuinely go, this is what's happening here, this is what we're doing. Little things like this, and you can keep refining this, but this is an example of solving for an outcome-driven approach that creates authenticity, so that when you ask a question, like in the previous example, the person may want to actually show you what they've done. So, all right. And so now what we're looking at is we're going through this thing. We're establishing trust. We're trying to show we genuinely want to learn about you, and we're trying to show you about us, right? And we've led by example. You've done this. So now the question is, what do we want them to show us, and what are we going to assess, right? And so this is an important thing. Generally, we find in the old approach, this Q&A based thing, it's very focused on experience. Are they committed to the industry? Are they confident? Do they show credibility? Now, just talk through this. This is not at all to say in the new approach, we're not going to look for experience and are they actually able to solve the problem you have? Do they have the technical skills? That's definitely still a thing. What we're going to talk is like, what is experience, right? What does that look like? What experience is necessary? Which also links into industry. So like a lot of people want to go, oh, I'd like to see if you're hiring a person into a finance team, maybe an operation role, you go, I'd really like someone maybe for a few years experience in the finance industry, and maybe they've got a Bachelor of Commerce. Don't know. I don't think there's a strong case to say that's a really good hiring approach. There are so many people that have Bachelors of Commerce that then go into something for a few years because they've got their Bachelor of Commerce. So they've got to go into something for a few years. So many of them down the track end up leaving the industry. It's not a strong marker. The person doesn't know what they're doing. If someone was doing something else and then made the active decision to switch and get into it, I think that is a much stronger marker of actually being committed to what they're doing. And so a lot of the way we perceive things like this can be traps. Confidence, which we see a lot, like does a person present confidently, is also a massive trap. There's a concept which we look at is like the Dunning-Kruger curve, which is the relationship between a person's confidence and their competency on a topic. And what it suggests is before a person knows enough about a thing, that is the peak of their confidence, right? And then when you generally have some aha moment or some point where you've now crossed the threshold and you fall into the valley of despair where you realize how little you know, and then you actually can start learning. So confidence is a tricky thing to assess, because when people are most confident is actually when they know so little they don't even know about the thing they're talking about. So this is a very difficult thing to assess. And there's so many different expressions. So, as an example we often use is like, if someone tells you exactly how something works and they're super confident, that's probably a massive red flag. Whereas if someone tells you about, they don't know exactly how to create them, but these are all the things they've done that they've learned from, and these were their pain points, and they're talking about where things went wrong, is that a lack of confidence, or is that someone actually exhibiting what confidence is? So this is one I think it has a lot of complexity to it. Credibility, that's another complex one to say, well, what does credibility look like? And these sort of go hand in hand around this Dunning-Kruger challenge, which what I'd say is in the new approach, focused around alignment, getting the person to show you the things that you can see in your team in the future that make it a highly productive team. What are they and how do you look for it? These are some examples of things, and you can determine for your own team what they are. We work with companies to figure that out. But as an example, you have things like, we've talked about this a bit already, accountability. So people that are highly accountable, that take responsibility for their outcomes, care towards others, right? Care towards a team and producing a good outcome. Yeah, and so with what's important for them, a big thing we see is a disconnect between thinking everyone we want to hire needs to be a top performer, an A player, this like super ambitious, driven person that just learns ferociously and wants to go on, can become the CEO and can solve problems and just tackle everything. You do want them, right? But do you need everyone in your team to be that? And so what we more talk about is what the successful candidate is, right? Because it just changes. That's a different thing to a top performer, right? It could be, but you're asking, is that what a successful candidate will look like? And so as an example, like if you're running a operations team, right, whether it's in a bank, an insurance company, any company, right, and you've got this ops team and you've got a team of 15 and they all do fairly similar roles, something like this. Do you want them all to be that top performer, high performer? Probably not. Maybe one of them, maybe two, something like this could be the case. You have 15 of them, they're going to leave. You're not going to be able to make them all happy. You're not going to be able to make them all COOs or whatever it is. It's just not going to happen. So understanding what's important for them and then designing this when you bring them in, and who a successful candidate will be, is what you're trying to find. And so as an example, you could be finding people that actually want to be in a stable role, right? That want to be there for the long term because they have other drivers in their life, but they exhibit great personal accountability. They care greatly about what they do, but they just have a different thing that's important to them that aligns with what you need as well for the team. That's what we mean by solving for like what's important for them. Now, as an example, I'd like to now extend that example even further. Say for an operations role, this is an actual example of things that we'd look for and how you can, maybe see things differently. Let's say this is an operations role in a finance firm. And you get two candidates apply and you look at their CVs. And this is person one has something like, I've got a Bachelor of Commerce. I've worked at a reputable bank for 3 years and I'm looking for my next challenge. Person two has a Bachelor of Business and they've worked at a big bank. And then they've also worked at a private financial service firm in an operations role for 4 years in total, 2 years in each. Very similar backgrounds. How do you tell the difference? Is one better than the other? I don't know, basically. So they seem exactly the same thing. I don't know what any of that means. So then we'd say, okay, we ask a question, something like this. How do you get them to show something around how they learn, right? Are they curious and do they learn and are they accountable? Things like this. So say if you ask them a question like, can you describe to me a time in your life where you were convinced you were right, then realized you were completely wrong? What was it and what were the odds? And person one, which has a Bachelor of Commerce and 3 years of experience in this and ticks your experience in industry and confidence and credibility, it ticks this thing suitably for your role. And their response will be something like, I haven't experienced this yet. If I was to be wrong, I would accept it and I would not judge the situation. Person two says something like, yes, lots of scenarios. One that really comes to mind was a personal investment I made that I deliberated around. And these were my considerations for this. And it went horribly wrong because I didn't realize there was this thing around risk, and I didn't take advice from people that actually had a lot of experience in investing. These were my lessons. Now this is how I approach my portfolio. Something like this. Which one of those do you think will be better in your team? The one, and these people are around now, 27 years of age, one that doesn't have a situation in their life where they thought they were right and then realized they were wrong. They haven't been wrong yet in their life, but if they do realize at some point that they have been wrong, they would own it. And another one that has lots of scenarios and can articulate nicely a really powerful lesson that they've had in their life. Which one shows accountability, curiosity, the ability to learn? For us, person two, you don't even need to look at their CVs. Have they solved this problem before, right? Opposed to experience and industry and these things. You're trying to be specific and ask yourself the question, like, have they actually solved the problem before? And part of that is, do they need to have it? What is this problem? Does it exist? So like, if you've got a fairly entry-level operations role in a finance company, say, do they actually need experience in the industry? Most of the ones I see, they do not, right? You're just limiting a pool of candidates into an arbitrary space rather than actually focusing on things that actually do lead to success. Because if you can train a person within a month or 2 months to be productive in the thing, and a lot of what you're training them is the specific nuance of your company, they don't need to have solved the problem before. And you can then actually get a bigger pool and focus on these other things that are much more important to alignment to the problem, like to building a great team. And so there are definitely roles, right? And as you get more and more senior, that they have to have solved a problem and they need to know it intimately. So like, and as an example, when you're trying to figure this out, is like, if you've got a marketing person, right, and you want to ask them like, okay, where are they with marketing? And you want them to help you with product launches or business launches and different things, right? If you were to meet with a marketing person and you ask them like, can you describe to me some product launches you've done in the past and how they went? That's one thing. And they can show you now how they think of it. Now, what you're listening for, they don't need to necessarily solve the exact problem you're doing. What you listen to is the way they talk about how they solve that problem. So if you have a marketing person that talks about vaguely, and the big thing is vagaries, right? Like, oh yeah, we did some product launches. This is sort of how we approached it. This is what happened, blah, blah, blah. They probably don't know it in detail. What you're looking for is when someone goes into great detail around how they did it. So it's like, for this product launch stuff, it's like, yeah, this is where we went in with, this is where it went wrong, these are the challenges, this is what we tried to do to then fix this, and that also didn't work. By the third product launch, I really figured out that this thing, and then this thing, and then this thing, when I did it in that sequence and did it like that, that worked really well. Blah, blah. When they're going into nuance and detail around the thing you want to know, that shows that they probably were actively involved in it. It's very easy for people to be in a team and along the ride, but have not actually solved the problem. And so that's what you want to be listening for. So like with this one, this whole thing, I'm talking about hiring, right? Now, do I have a HR or talent acquisition background experience? No. Have I been in the HR industry or people and culture industry? No. I've hired people for 15 years. I've built psychometric tools. I've built behavioral assessment tools. I've worked with people scientists. I've worked with psychologists. I've worked with data scientists to try and get better at hiring. And what I'm breaking down and going into the nuance of the things that I've found really useful to doing that, right? You want to listen to the way a person describes how they've approached the problem and like they have actually lived it. They've felt the pain of it. They've had mistakes, and then they've learned from it. So as we're going into this, and let's say you start honing in onto things that you actually want to grade in alignment, what you're realizing is outcome-based grading is a skill, and you're trying to learn how to press into things. So like, this is an example of a response to a question that is like, have you ever found yourself in life not fully satisfied and therefore took some action to address it? And person say, if I ever find myself unfulfilled, I wouldn't hesitate to take immediate action to change course. This is a fairly neutral, almost you can't tell anything from this. And so what you'll only do is go, okay, so if something like this was to be said, if I ever find myself unfulfilled, I wouldn't hesitate to take immediate action to change course. What questions do you ask to not start forming a view so you can grade it to say, do I see this as the person taking accountability of their life and solving for this? Or do I see this as a person just running away from things and not dealing? So if you said, well, can you give me an example of when that has happened or why, right? So someone could then say, well, yes, when this happened, I actually went to my manager and said, this is what's affecting me, right? I don't understand why these things happen. It's leaving me unfulfilled and frustrated. And now I don't feel aligned. And then we had a discussion and it was like, the company is going in this direction, but I wanted this and it didn't work. And therefore I then changed course. That's a pretty strong approach, right? And then if you're the manager, tend to be like, oh, that would be great if this person did that to me, right? And said that to me and gave us a chance to talk through this and figure out, is there something that makes sense? If this person's like, yeah, no, I was just experiencing, I didn't like it, so I just leave, right? It's like, well, that's pretty risky. They're saying to you, it's your responsibility then as a company to fulfill them. And if you don't, they're just going to leave. That's really difficult to deal with. And that's quite risky. So you got to try and learn about what can I actually take from this and how do I grade the things that are important to me. As another example, you see lots of people look at, a person, they look at a CV, this person's changed jobs 3 times and only been in each place for under a year. That's a red flag. It could be, right? The next thing you actually probably want to ask is, why has that happened? It could be a great opportunity to actually learn about and a person to exhibit to show you potentially that they have high standards, that they actually did things at each company to try to improve things and to express things. And they're finding that they're not aligned, right, with those companies that they had problems with, and they could be unlucky a few times with their manager and different things. And they also could talk about the lessons that they had around what they've done to show how they've learned and how they've developed. There could also be another side to it where they're just running away and not dealing with things and flipping around. And it does pose issues. They from that exact same set of data, there can be very different paths. So what you're learning is how do you actually grade things in a meaningful way and learn how to probe into stuff. And this is a skill. So if we're going to take all of this all the way back to the top, very quickly through this video, we've just been going through broad general examples to give you an idea of this new approach to hiring, which is outcome driven as an extension of your leadership. We're building up commitment. So getting people to show commitment to actually want the role and to be interested in it. Focus on trying to get them to show you their mindset, and then everything's solving for alignment. You're trying to fix factors and you don't want heaps of them. You just want a few that are actually strong indicators of success. So you can keep it simple so you can actually start honing the skill and start learning to grade things on a spectrum. And as a further example of this is why you want to think of things as a spectrum is you're going back to what is curiosity? It's not a binary, right? And when you start seeing how lots of different people show curiosity, you're starting to get an idea of the spectrum. And so again, coming in here, what you want to take away is you start looking through your hiring process, right? And you start thinking, what do I do to build trust through authenticity? Can I start making changes to how I approach my interviews, how I write my job ads, all these sort of things? How do I start doing that from the start? How do I start showing what I'm about as a manager, as a company, not telling? How do I now design a hiring process that gets the candidate to show me what they're about, not tell me to fit my box? And how do I start learning the skill to actually grade these things? If you start implementing things across here, you can have huge success in hiring, right? We've seen teams within short periods of time completely change their environment. Can have big turnover, completely drop it down. Managers that are just constantly caught up in people issues, completely free themselves to focus on strategic things, increase revenue, increase productivity, all this sort of stuff. And it starts from, as an extension of leadership, finding people that you really want in your team that increase productivity. Now, we can talk for days around these sort of things. So if you're interested to learn more, we have heaps of resources. We'd be interested. We're keen to share more with you and keep breaking down to help increase the way you hire, help you build better teams.